homes. Where will you go?
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Morning.
And remind us or explain to us what exactly you were doing in Washington on the 6th.
Representing my constituents.
Mr. President, welcome to Florida.
What the governor's done is pretty remarkable.
That was President Biden with Republican Governor Ron DeSantis today in Florida to survey the damage from Hurricane Ian. We welcome you to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. We thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with new CBS News polling on key races in the battleground state of Arizona. Incumbent Democratic Senator Mark Kelly has a 3-point edge over Republican Blake Masters in the U.S. Senate race there. And the governor's race is even between Democrat Katie Hobbs and Republican Kari Lake. For more, we're joined tonight by two of my CBS News colleagues. Executive Director of Elections and Surveys Anthony Salvanto is in New York in Studio 57. And senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in Tempe, Arizona. Let's begin with Anthony. You are right where we want you, at the big board, Anthony. Walk us through the latest polls.
How you doing, Scott? Ed is in the warmer place, though. I'll give you that. Look, here's that 3-point edge you just described for Mark Kelly. One of the things that's behind that is personal favorability ratings. You look, Mark Kelly has pretty high ones. A majority of voters saying they like that. There's other candidates, Katie Hobbs, Kari Lake, fall behind that. But then Blake Masters comes in at 37%. So he's got that gap as well as good positive approval ratings on his job. The other part of this is something Democrats are trying to argue in their case. Who would you describe as either mainstream or extreme? And here, Blake Masters is seen by a majority as being too extreme. Mark Kelly much less so. So that's part of the personal dynamic that underpins some of this. But here's a headwind, and I have to point this out. Even though the Democratic leads, Democrats in Arizona, as elsewhere, are not winning winning voters who say the economy and inflation are the most important issues. They're winning voters who say abortion is important, but there's a gap there. And this is a wide number who say that those are important. So that's something I think we want to watch as we go forward in Arizona. Can Democrats make up any ground among that really key economic-centered voter?
What's going into the views of the economy among these voters? What is informing that opinion if it's so important according to the findings?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because, look, and this is part of our new numbers here this afternoon. You've got the Arizona economy being rated underwater, right? It's majority saying that their state's economy is bad. It's not something we've seen in every state. Now, it's a little bit better compared to the national economy, but that still isn't good. And then you get to the personal level on this. Are you optimistic going forward? Well, this doesn't accrue very well for the party that's in power, for the Democrats. You've got a majority pessimistic about their economy. Look at this number on the housing market, Scott. 71% saying that they're pessimistic about the housing market in Arizona, 77% about inflation, the cost of goods. And I do want to point this out, too. Your family's financial situation is also rated negative when people look ahead. There's another little wrinkle I do want to add, and that is one of the things about Arizona is it's got a lot of retirees, some talk about Social Security, what to do about the program, some on the Republican side arguing that some of the accounts ought to be privatized. That does not find favor with a majority of Arizonans. That's 57%, shows that a bad idea. Wouldn't surprise me if the Democrats start talking about that a little bit, pushing back against the Republicans on that part of the economic front, Scott.
The findings of this battleground tracker were resonating here in Washington today. Anthony Salvanto, good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
For more on Arizona, let's go to Arizona, where it's 40 degrees warmer than it is in Washington today. Ed O'Keefe is in Tempe. Ed, what are you hearing on the ground based on that battleground tracker and based on your interviews today?
Scott, good to be with you. And, you know, we come to Arizona because they hold close elections here. They're definitely doing that this year. One of the big battlegrounds holding a statewide race for governor and a statewide race for U.S. Senate. As you saw in Anthony's numbers, both of those races are close. But another reason we're tracking Arizona closely this year is because it's one of those states that has 3 statewide Republican candidates openly talking about how they believe, incorrectly, that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Kerry Lake, the candidate for governor, Blake Masters, the candidate for U.S. Senate, and Mark Fincham, the Republican candidate for Arizona Secretary of State. Were he to win the race, he would be responsible, whoever wins the race, is responsible for elections going into the 2024 election. We spoke to Mark Fincham, the Republican, and we spoke to his Democratic opponent, Adrian Fontes, about his concerns if Fincham wins, because Fincham is arguably one of the most vocal so-called election deniers in the country. Take a look and you'll see why. To those outside this state looking in, who know that the stakes are always high in Arizona, because y'all have big, competitive, and close elections, what do you say to those that are concerned about how you would manage the 2024 presidential election?
Well, I think they can be assured that my commitment is to just follow the law. It's that simple. We also need to have an elections procedure manual that reflects current law. There have been a number of changes in law. The current Secretary of State has failed to keep up with that document.
Once we win, however, the challenge is just going to be communicating with regular, everyday Arizonans and helping to continue to spread the truth, continue to show them that they can have faith in their fellow Americans who are the ones who actually run elections in Arizona and across the United States. In that role, I would be able to help communicate with voters across Arizona about how their local elections are run by the counties, how those county officials really represent them at the neighborhood level.
So Fincham is one of those who has been involved in filing legal challenges to various accusations or concerns about fraud or other interference in the elections in 2020. He told us in our extended interview he doesn't, for example, trust the software that was used to tabulate votes in this state, and that ultimately there should be a paper count if he had his way. But he also went to great lengths to point out a Secretary of State can't unilaterally decide how exactly elections are run. It's up to the state legislature to set the law and for whoever is Secretary of State to then enforce it. But Adrian Fontes, his opponent, Democrats in this state and observers nationwide have said if somebody like Mark Fincham, who's been so vociferous in his concerns and opposition to the results of 2020, is elected, what could that mean, Scott, going forward into 2024 when inevitably Arizona is once again one of those battleground states we watch closely?
Yeah, Mark Fincham isn't just a candidate who denies the legitimacy of the election. He's one of this group of nominees in the Republican Party for state or federal office who was in Washington on January 6th. We've compiled this list, this growing list of names of candidates nominated by the party for state or federal office who were here January 6th. Now, earlier in the cycle, Ed, we wondered if that was going to be a hurdle or a hindrance to these candidates in the primary or in the general election. It didn't seem to be much of a hurdle in the primary, so we wonder if Mark Fincham in the general election faces any questions about that. You asked him about it today. What was the response?
Well, part of why we asked him is because he actually volunteered some of this information in a statewide debate last week, saying that he had spoken to the committee and spoken to the Justice Department. In the debate, however, there wasn't an opportunity to get into the details with him. Yes, the January 6th committee did ask him for an interview earlier this year. We talked a little bit about it. Why this is revealing, Scott, is because it gives us now a good sense of one of those lesser-known witnesses and how the process went for them when they engaged. Take a look. You revealed at a debate last week that you spoke with the Justice Department and the January 6th committee about being in Washington on January 6, 2021. How'd that go?
About the same way any witness interview would go. I was treated as a witness, not as a suspect.
Were you subpoenaed?
Subpoenaed like a lot of people were.
You were? Mm-hmm. Was it in person or virtual?
It was to my attorney.
The subpoena was?
The subpoena was.
Your interviews, though, with the January 6th committee and the Justice Department.
Forgive me, I didn't know what you meant. That was virtual and recorded. Long.
How long?
It was a few hours.
A few hours?
Mm-hmm.
And who asked the questions?
Staffers from the J6 committee.
What'd you think of them?
ill-prepared. They asked the same question so many times, I had to remind them that they had asked the question 3, 4, 5 times before.
Were any of the committee members
No,
involved? No.
no.
And when was it? When was the interview?
Well, that was months ago. I don't remember exactly.
Before your primary, though.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was months ago.
And the Justice Department, then, they interviewed you as well?
No, they asked for the same material that was presented to the J6 committee, the printed material. Didn't actually have a voice interview with them, but that was also months ago. Haven't heard another word from them since. No.
Okay. Would you...
I think they figured out I was a witness, not a participant.
And remind us or explain to us what exactly you were doing in Washington on the 6th.
Representing my constituents who had some concerns about irregularities that had been observed, evidence that was collected November 30th, 2020. As the chairman of the House Federal Relations Committee, we held a hearing, an ad hoc hearing on public hearing on election integrity. Certain evidence was gathered that was turned over to the Arizona Senate 14 days later that created probable cause that resulted in the issuance of subpoenas. I mean, this is no sense in relitigating this thing. I mean,
Right. So then you were you got to Washington when?
I think I arrived on the 5th.
Okay.
Provided an evidence book to Representatives Gosar and Biggs, and was invited to the Capitol to speak at something on the 6th.
So you were at the Capitol on the 6th?
Yeah, along with a whole bunch of other people.
Right.
But I was on the opposite side of the Capitol, at least as I understand where things were going on. I wasn't able to see what was going on from where I was
Well,
at.
there's video of you on the steps.
Not on the steps. On the plaza, yes. Not on the steps.
So you were on the side of the mall.
I was on the U.S. Supreme Court side,
So
wherever
the east
that's
side.
at.
Okay, you were on the east side.
I don't know directions in D.C.
Yeah, that's
It's a
the
bit of a
east front.
confusing city, yeah. So, but probably, I don't know. It's hard to judge with the number of people that were there, but quite a ways away from the kerfuffle that was going on. And I don't even know if it was the front of the Capitol or the back of the
There
Capitol.
was a kerfuffle on all sides of the Capitol that day.
Well, where I was at, I didn't see anybody throwing punches. I didn't see anybody damaging property. I saw a lot of people that were just not very happy.
Scott, as you said, we wondered whether being a January 6th participant would affect these people politically. I remember speaking to a candidate, for example, earlier this year in Michigan who didn't make it even to the primary, but Mark Fincham made it through the primary. Now he's on a statewide ballot, and he's got a good shot at winning. And it's a reminder that there are dozens of people like this across the country who participated in that insurrection, who have raised doubts about what went on Election Day 2020, and have a good shot of getting elected to public office.
Good work on that, Ed. It's noteworthy that he acknowledges giving paperwork to the Justice Department. Will reinforce he's not accused of any crime. And that interview he says he undertook with the January 6th Select Committee that went several hours and was conducted by staff, similar to many of the interviews the committee has conducted with witnesses. Ed O'Keefe in Tempe, thank you very much.
Take care.
Natural disasters make for strange bedfellows. And today we saw that in action when President Biden traveled down to survey Hurricane Ian damage in Florida alongside Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. What it could mean for 2024 next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming free speech.
It's evident that there's a wave of censorship across the nation.
Angry partisan debate in schools.
College campuses have not been a place of intellectual diversity for the longest time now.
Are loud voices silencing a generation.
I don't feel comfortable speaking out.
I started to realize I wasn't even discussing stuff in class. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself.
Are the kids all right? Free speech. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. When weather turns extreme,
a 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
Every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
I'm here for you. Take an orange? Cheers. You do? Here. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
Mr. President, welcome to Florida. We appreciate working together across various levels of government.
What the governor's done is pretty remarkable so far.
President Biden and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis coming together this afternoon in Fort Myers, Florida, in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. The president says more than 200,000 families have already registered for urgent assistance, making it what he says is the largest search and rescue effort ever in U.S. history. For more on this, CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now from the White House. Caitlin, walk us through what President Biden did during that trip to Florida today.
Well, he was going down there to survey the damage, Scott, but the biggest headline that came from this was this kind of cordial atmosphere between himself and the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, a Republican. And there is talk and speculation that these are two men who could potentially face each other in 2024. That's a long way off, but that's all to say that we know, of course, that Ron DeSantis has political ambitions beyond the governorship. He's been a rising star in the Republican Party and kind of seen in the Republican Party as the heir apparent to Donald Trump. And what was interesting about today was that they got along. You had a Republican governor and a Democratic president, both, essentially working together to say, hey, we're coming together for the sake of the victims of this storm. Biden said that they have been working hand in hand, he said that DeSantis did a good job, and they've remained in lockstep in their approach to handling the aftermath of this crisis. In turn, you saw DeSantis welcome the president, give him a handshake, and say that, they've gotten support from the federal government, from local governments, that everybody's working together to address this issue. This is significant because DeSantis is in re-election mode. He's running for re-election as governor of Florida, and he's facing Charlie Crist, a Democrat who you may remember years and years and years ago when he was a Republican, essentially got booted out of his party for giving a hug to then President Barack Obama when he visited Florida. So a lot of times there are these kind of strange alliances made. That was a little bit of a different story back then because they were talking about a federal funding bill. But, these kinds of situations create strange bedfellows, as you say, and there are kind of political consequences sometimes for them. Here, though, I was really curious what Charlie Crist was watching and thinking, watching all of this.
Can't shake this thought that if these are the two nominees in 2024, we're going to see today's images on this endless loop 24 months from now, a ceaseless loop of what happened today. So circumstance brings them together. Is there any sense their relationship has actually changed or shifted?
Well, the White House press secretary yesterday was asked about this because remember, just a couple of weeks ago, the administration was highly critical of DeSantis for flying migrants to Martha's Vineyard and elicited a wave of really strong criticism from Democrats. And going into this, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said, look, today is not going to be about politics. This is not the time to even discuss any of that. They didn't have any plans to discuss any of that during this trip, that this would solely be focused on the hurricane relief efforts. But you have to wonder exactly what you just said, which is if Ron DeSantis runs for president, will this circulate in a Republican primary to his disadvantage? You could also say, look, this is a test of presidential governorships are often a test of presidential leadership in some ways, addressing these kinds of crises. And so DeSantis could find ways to kind of use this to his advantage. Does this change the relationship between them? No. But what it does do is kind of provide a refreshing look at how politics kind of used to be. If there's a natural disaster, people are in need, people need help. You kind of work together to get that help and not really make a big deal about it. So it kind of was a throwback, but not something that I think we'll kind of continue to see in different circumstances.
It has this echo of 10 years ago this month when the Republican governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, welcomed President Obama after Superstorm Sandy at the White House. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, Republicans are making gains in a key Democratic voting bloc. Former President Trump is courting ahead of the midterms. You're streaming Red and Blue.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming free speech.
It's evident that there's a wave of censorship across the nation.
Angry partisan debate in schools.
College campuses have not been a place of intellectual diversity for the longest time now.
Are loud voices silencing a generation.
I don't feel comfortable speaking out.
I started to realize I wasn't even discussing stuff in class. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself.
Are the kids all right? Free speech. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
Go to the ends of the earth
Right now.
We got something crazy.
and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative,
Da-da-da-da.
and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
I'm here for you. Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
Hispanics are rallying to our cause for a simple reason, because you love America and you believe in America and you know that the time has come to stand up and defend America and everything it stands for.
Former President Trump speaking in Miami this afternoon at the Hispanic Leadership Conference. The latest government census showed the Latino population in the U.S. has grown from 50.5 million in 2010 to 62.1 million in 2020. And the number of Latinos registering to vote and heading to the polls is also going up. CBS News correspondent Enrique Acevedo is covering the event in Miami. What's your big takeaway from what you saw and what you heard, Enrique?
Well, Scott, former President Trump was warmly embraced by a group of Latino conservative leaders like Abraham Enriquez, the young founder of an organization called Bienvenido, who referred to former President Trump as the first Latino president in U.S. history. We also heard from the CEO of Goya Foods, Alberto Unane, who called the FBI, the Justice Department, the secret police, and then introduced President Trump as the GOAT, the greatest president of all time. So a warm embrace from the conservative leaders in that room and from a crowd here in downtown Miami that is supportive of America First policies and the idea of President Trump running for president again.
We have some numbers, I think, showing the share of the Latino vote the former president won in 2016 and 2020. As we alluded to, it didn't just increase, it increased dramatically. So the question is that trajectory continuing? Are Republicans making similar gains? And if the former president ran again, would that share increase? Based on your reporting, is that a continuing trend or one that stopped in 2020?
So that's an interesting question. Like you say, we saw that increase from 2016 to 2020. Here in Florida, President Trump in 2016 got around 34% of the Latino vote. 2020, a different story, 45%, which is a record turnout among Latino voters for a Republican candidate. That trend, I think, has continued. If you look at voter registration numbers in the state of Florida, Republicans were trailing Democrats in 2020. Now they're ahead by a comfortable margin. I think the last number was around 112,000 more Republican voters registered in the state to vote. When you look at Hispanics specifically, the advantage that Democrats had in places like South Florida, here in Miami-Dade County, in Broward, that has also decreased in the last couple of years with more Republican Latino voters joining the ranks. So I think it's going to be interesting now in November to see how some of those candidates, Republican candidates, perform in districts like Florida 25, 27. Going back to District 25, the two largest city in that district, the case of Hialeah and Doral. In 2016, President Trump lost in Doral by more than 40% or around 40% against Hillary Clinton. In 2020, Scott, he won that city by 2%. An incredible turnaround if you think of how, the comfortable margin that Hillary Clinton won by in 2016.
So many big state and federal elections in Florida this year. Do you get the sense, you're watching the ads and talking to your sources, that this is the primary focus of candidates to win over this block of voters?
Well, I think they're making a difference not just in the traditional states like California and Arizona, here in Florida. The Latino vote in places like the Carolinas, in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in other states like Nevada. It might not be the largest portion of the electorate, but that 3-4% in a very close election like the one we saw in 2020 makes a big difference. So I think that's why more candidates are paying attention, are investing in the Latino community, are engaging with the Latino community, because one of the most, unfounded myths about the Latino voter is that they're not enthusiastic about the political process, they're not engaged. And I think candidates from both parties are starting to realize that Latinos will be engaged to the extent that the process engages with them.
It's worth noting, as we show these numbers, as it relates to congressional races, there is that Senate race, oh, by the way, and all of these competitive U.S. House races. Which are the ones you're watching closest?
Well, the case of Maria Elvira Salazar in that competitive district, Florida 25th, I think she won by a very narrow margin. No one expected her to take that district from Democrats, and she did. So she did that on the shoulders of the Venezuelan American community, mainly a constituency that has now been very supportive of Republican candidates. That's interesting, Scott, because when people try to explain the Latino vote, or what we call the Latino vote here in Florida, they always talk about Cuban Americans. Well, Cuban Americans are now not the majority of Latino voters, at least in the case of South Florida. We see other voters coming from places like Colombia. There are over 1.5 million Colombians now here in Florida, half of them eligible voters. We see voters from Venezuela, like I was saying. So it's probably the most diverse Latino vote in the entire country here in Florida, and that is helping the state become even more conservative, which I think it's fascinating when you think about it.
Beautiful view there in Miami. Enrique Acevedo, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?